Blizzard has revealed the BlizzCon 2019 key art, and it confirms Diablo 4. Why? Isn't it obvious? 1, 2, 3, 4. Checkmate, atheists. Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include multiplayer coming to Cyberpunk 2077, more evidence to suggest that a World of Warcraft expansion leak is true, a roundup of action RPG news, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the video description below, but right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted of new Saturday episodes and keep up to speed on gaming news. In our first topic, we'll cover Cyberpunk 2077. First off, we learned that cutscenes will now be mostly in first-person perspective as opposed to third-person. This comes to us via the Cyberpunk global community lead via Twitter. He said, quote, "Achieving full immersion in a first-person perspective game is extremely important, and the decision made by the team to go 100% first-person in Cyberpunk is something that will benefit it greatly from gameplay and storytelling perspectives. That said, players will still be able to see their characters in the inventory screen during driving sequences, in mirrors, and very occasionally in some of the cutscenes." Now, opinions are kind of split on this decision, and I want to know where you stand. My first reaction to this was, well, what's the point in having deep character customization if we never really get to see our character's face? I do agree that having a first-person perspective delivers a much more immersive experience. But I also like to see cutscenes put together with cinematography in mind, camera angles, focusing in different places, telling a story through the cutscene, which is much more limiting when you have to have one single perspective. Further, I feel staying in that first-person immersive mode works best when you have silent protagonists, or at least when the protagonist's personality is not important to the story. But it feels like your main character in Cyberpunk will be important, so being able to see in cutscenes facial expressions, reactions, being able to connect with the character on a deeper level is something that I would have wanted to see. I could understand the decision for the greater immersion, however. My personal preference would be first person in gameplay and then have cinematic cutscenes, but I turn the question to you. What would you prefer? Are you happy with this decision? The other Cyberpunk news this week is that multiplayer will be coming to the game. I was very excited when I first heard about this. Then I took a moment and I reflected and I said, uh-oh. This could either be amazing or it could just be another tacked on afterthought form of multiplayer that we tend to see in primarily single player games, especially story-driven single player RPGs. My dream is for a multiplayer mode in which you're basically playing through the actual game with another person. My fear is that we're going to get some form of PvE or PvE side mode that isn't going to end up being played by most people. And the exact way they're revealing this almost lends more credence to that. On Twitter, they said, as we're getting closer to launching single-player Cyberpunk 2077 in April 2020, we'd like to confirm that multiplayer's in the works. If you feel like lending us your skills, apply here. The plan for now is to deliver Cyberpunk 2077 in April, then follow up with DLCs free, and single-player content, and once we're done, invite you for some multiplayer action. I love that there's going to be free DLC, free single-player content. That sounds amazing, but if they're just now hiring for the multiplayer, if the multiplayer is going to come later, it's hard to imagine that it's going to be integrated into the core experience of the game. I got my fingers crossed for this one, because if Cyberpunk can deliver an amazing single-player experience and then also have a robust multiplayer mode, this might become one of my favorite games. On to some Activision Blizzard and World of Warcraft news. Ever since the release of World of Warcraft Classic, Activision stock has been on the rise. The stock tanked heavily starting in October 2018, cratering by November 2018. And this is the first time we're seeing some real growth, some real bounce back in the stock. It's still too early to tell, there's still a long ways to go to get caught up, but at this point, the stock has now reached a level where it was on the way down in November. It's clear that WoW Classic's launch has been a success in pretty much every aspect. The question is, will it maintain that success in the long term, or is it going to fizzle out? Speaking of World of Warcraft, back in July, there was a 4chan leak claiming that the next WoW expansion would be called Shadowlands. It included a photo that could have been faked and lots of information that it seemed most people didn't believe would be true, so we didn't bother covering it at the time. However, more recently it seems that same leaker or someone else has come and put out yet more information on the topic, including a new image that I feel would have been much more difficult to fake. If it is a fake, this was probably a lot of work to make. The image seems to be from a cinematic or a cutscene depicting many ghostly ships, and includes a lot more information on the expansion. It seems the basic story is that right before the expansion, all the major characters basically die and wake up in the Shadowlands. In Warcraft lore, the Shadowlands is where you go when you die. It's a shadowy version of the real world. I'll pop links in the video description if you want to check out the full information on these leaks yourselves. There's a lot to parse in there. Again, a lot of it sort of stretches credulity, but at this point, many people are reacting to it like, I wouldn't put it past Blizzard to do this. In other Blizzard news, Overwatch for Nintendo Switch has been officially revealed, confirming the leak from last week. It'll release on October 15th, which is earlier than I expected, and interestingly, will feature gyro controls. Now, I'm no console expert, but my understanding of gyro controls is rather than just relying on the thumbstick, you can physically tilt or maneuver the controller in order to aim. I am hopeless at FPSs with a thumbstick. I am very much a PC gamer. Give me a mouse to aim, but I'm actually interested to try out gyro controls. And I know other games have done it, but this is the first time I really learned about it. One thing that I wish Blizzard would do, which I doubt they would, is have some form of cross-platform account so that you can take your progress from PC onto your Nintendo Switch. The prospect of farming up all the skins and everything all over again seems pretty daunting. Obviously, you would want to keep your rank disconnected for PC and Switch, but it seems a simple toggle menu or something should be able to alleviate that. On to action RPG news, starting with Path of Exile, whose new Blight League and patch 3.8 have launched. Full patch notes in the video description. If you've had a chance to play the new league, do sound off in the comments with your thoughts. This one was a little polarizing. This is the Tower Defense League, which interests me, but I know a lot of people are just turned off by the tower defense mechanic. For those of you who have had a chance to try it, what are your thoughts? I did have a chance to play as of the time of you watching this, but not as of the time of me recording this. So I look forward to playing it later in the day today, Friday, and wish I could bring you my thoughts already on today, Saturday, that you're watching this. Now, one interesting thing that happened this week was that the devs were implementing a change to master missions, which overall was a positive change, but there was one aspect of the change that it seems some vocal part of the community on Reddit was unhappy about. Developer Chris Wilson stepped in and posted on Reddit, quote, "As you know, unused daily master missions in 3.8 can stack indefinitely during the league." This, by the way, was the change that everyone was happy about. However, alongside this change, we reduced the number you get to 2 per day, because prior to 3.8, most players ended up not running every daily mission they received every day, and so many were wasted. This is the part that people were upset about, and they claimed, well, we ran fewer missions per day because there were some missions we just didn't want to run. He goes on to say, "We were trying to make it so that the number of missions was the same as before for most players. We didn't see this as an intentional nerf because the system is now so much more permissive than before." At this point, it just seems like Chris Wilson is explaining away why they made the decision that they made. But then he goes on to say, "Either way, feedback on Reddit about this change was negative, and we didn't feel strongly about it, so are changing it based on this feedback. When you log in each day, you will now receive a daily mission for each of the 5 masters." I really can't say enough good things about GGG. The communication, the speed at which they respond to feedback, address it, the fact that they are open to doing so, the fact that they're able to evaluate, and this is something actually used, to my understanding, in conflict resolution. If ever you're in a disagreement with someone about something, you evaluate, okay, how much do you care about this on a scale of 1 to 10 versus how much do I care about this on a scale of 1 to 10? If you seem to care about this an 8 out of 10 and I only care a 5 out of 10, well, I'll cede to you. And this seems to be what happened here. The devs didn't feel strongly about it. They felt that the players felt strongly, so they let the players have it their way. And note, this is not just them giving in to what the players want. There are other things that they feel very strongly about that some vocal part of the community also feels strongly about, and they have not caved on it. For instance, trading. And that's very important for a developer as well, to not just give in to every player demand, but to understand and evaluate what do you feel is really important and stand by those things that are really important. but also allow yourself to be persuaded to change your mind. Now, one thing to note about the change is that if you do not log in for 5 days, you're not going to get missions on the days you don't log in. That's the only caveat here. As long as you log in that day, you don't have to play, just log in, you'll get the missions and you can stack them. The devs also, as usual, released a dev manifesto on balance changes with Blight. Lots of info in there, link in the description if you want to check it out. And then lastly, I just wanted to point you folks to an excellent resource, a post by Redditor RyanT12, who compiled a list of streamer starter builds. So if you're looking to dive into Blight League and you're looking for a build to run, this should help you out. Link below. On to some Torchlight 2 news. The game has now released on console. Torchlight 2 is a fantastic game. It released in 2012. This console release came as good news to everyone, particularly because you can play on Switch. But some Torchlight 2 fans are disappointed, claiming that this console version is more like Torchlight 2 Lite Edition. They cite a lack of control customization and the complete absence of gear swapping. And publisher Perfect World replied to that, stating, "For gear swapping, the PC version allows you to have 2 weapon sets. We removed this due to complexity on console of swapping 2 entire sets via controller. It's something that we might look into if we release a larger patch in the future, but it has a lot of edge cases that we would need to address and a lot more work than immediately perceived." Now, overall, the game is still Torchlight 2, but I think the fan criticism here is more that, at least if you had told us that what you were giving us was a watered-down Torchlight 2, we'd be okay with it, but we came in with certain expectations, and now these features are missing. But if you've played Torchlight 2 on console, leave a comment with your thoughts. Are you happy? On to Diablo news. As we said in the intro, Blizzard released the BlizzCon 2019 key art, and people are trying to draw conclusions based on this key art. They're saying, oh, the barbarian is toward the center, Diablo 4 confirmed. Others are saying, no, this is just about Diablo Immortal. One thing I would like to point out about the artwork itself is that the armor proportions don't feel wowified like they were in Diablo 3. The giant pauldrons, yes, his armor is still large, but it's not as exaggerated. It feels more realistic, and that's something that a lot of people said. Diablo 2, the armor styles felt more realistic versus World of Warcraft's overly exaggerated armor proportions. Still, though, the main point that I want to make about this is, let's take a look at the 2015 BlizzCon key art, where we see this evil-looking Crusader, and back then we were theorizing, oh man, is there going to be some kind of expansion or some new content or something? Why does this Crusader look corrupted? We're gonna get some kind of maybe a D4 reveal with a corrupted Crusader. And all that speculation ended up amounting to absolutely nothing. It turns out that the BlizzCon key art is really just pretty art that has no meaning to it. The only thing you can maybe glean is size or positioning of the character, may be a reflection on how important that franchise will be at BlizzCon, but even then, that's pretty much a stretch. And just to clear things up in case you're wondering, the top left is MohEternal from Heroes of the Storm, bottom left is Sylvanas from Warcraft, bottom is Tracer, to the right is some StarCraft character, I think it's Egon Stetman, when did he grow a beard? And the top right is Hearthstone. In other Diablo news, the Curse of Tristram, the community-made Diablo 2 remake in StarCraft 2, is now in open beta. You can play this yourself via the free-to-play arcade in StarCraft 2. Currently in the mod, we have all of Act 1, 3 difficulty modes, nearly all the skill trees up to level 12, and a bunch more content. Lastly, in some Diablo Immortal news, we've seen a couple new job postings for Diablo Immortal. One for a game producer. And some people are becoming concerned, why are they looking for a game producer now? Did someone leave? Is the development troubled? How come we haven't heard about this game? While I don't know anything for sure, what we do know is that Caleb Arsenault was previously a producer on Diablo Immortal. According to his LinkedIn, from August 2018 until March 2019, he was a senior game producer. But ever since April 2019, he's been a lead game producer. Sounds to me like Arsenault got a promotion either within Diablo Immortal or somewhere else, so it sounds like they just needed to replace him, and there's nothing really to be concerned about here. The other position they're hiring for is a senior combat designer, and one way to interpret that would be Yeah, why are they hiring combat designers at this point? Maybe development is troubled, but another way to interpret it would simply be that they plan for post-release support, which makes sense given this is the kind of game that you do want to keep supporting in the long term, assuming it'll be a game with microtransactions. And that's gonna wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video in which we discuss Blizzard suing a Chinese company for a Warcraft knockoff. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content. Checkmate, atheists!